welcome back to Local Decision 2020. I'm Rusty Ray, and we're joined now by the DFL candidate for State House out of District 38A. That's Kris Fredrick. Kris, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is an opportunity to fill a seat by Linda Runbeck, who's not running again, and this is an opportunity to, in your case, would be to flip that seat.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Why join this race now? Why? This is your first time running for office?
This is my first time running, but this is the perfect time to run. So I've got a background that fits in well with this race, and I think it's a great background for this seat. I've been an attorney for 21 years now, and I previously worked at Honeywell, but I changed careers about 3 years ago, and I now work in education.
Why did you change careers?
A couple of reasons. One, I have a great business background. I had a lot of fun at Honeywell. I became ultimately the general counsel for their research lab. But I took a look at my life at the time and decided that I wanted to have more of an impact on the lives of others. And so I looked at my wife. She worked in education and found a position within the Mounds View School District and realized that I could actually influence students and help expand their knowledge. And so that was something that was really attractive to me, using my background and my experience to help expand theirs.
So looking at education now and the way Minnesota funds education and the way that schools are able to get resources that they need in a normal situation, right?
Yes.
But now, especially in the light of COVID and distance learning and hybrid models and figuring out if they can even offer in-person learning based on the government guidelines and things like that, where does education in Minnesota sit right now? Where do you think it's headed? And given the financial situation that COVID has brought in the economy,
Right.
Where are schools headed in terms of having what schools need to offer this education?
It's tough right now. I mean, all students and staff and parents are sacrificing right now through the education process. It's not ideal, but we're making it work for what we've got to deal with. This is a difficult situation with the pandemic, and we'll pull through. But I do know that there are disparities between school districts, and we need to make sure that all schools and all districts have adequate funding that they need to help the students succeed. And so I see differences between districts because, again, I work in the Mounds View School District, and my kids, I have 3 kids who went through the Centennial High School or Centennial District. And I see disparities between those districts, and I want to work to end those disparities and make sure that they have the funding they need.
Well, what is it just as simple as property values for the discrepancies, or is it more than that, you think?
It's actually more. So our area, our district, is actually a little light on business tax revenue.
Right.
And so we need to focus more on attracting additional businesses into the area to help bring that revenue in to help support the schools. And ultimately, the funding does come from the state, and we're going to have to take a very hard look at what we can afford next session. So it's going to be a very difficult decision to decide how to fund the schools.
Well, on the part of Anoka County, especially in this district and up Lino Lakes and then up north of there, Centerville, and then going up the 35E corridor, Anoka County making a lot of efforts to try to recruit businesses. Again, pre-COVID,
Yes.
there was a big push and things have been stalled. But continuing that, but what can the state do? You mentioned that, and yeah, there may be room for more industry or more business or more tech-rooted businesses in that district or near that district to help with that. Is there room for the state to help in that regard?
I think so. I think Minnesota is a state that has fantastic history of innovation. We have the medical device technology companies. We've had Honeywell, for example, where I came from, a number of facilities scattered throughout the Twin Cities. And I think if we make it available, if we let them know that we're a district that is welcoming to businesses, that we would like them to come and place buildings and headquarters and things like that in our area, we can make ourselves more attractive. So we're going to have to look at the taxes, we're going to have to look at the property, we're going to look at every aspect of it just to attract those businesses, but I think we can do it. And I think it'll take some of the burden off the taxpayers themselves, which is a big deal.
Well, sometimes what can lure those businesses into a state or into a region are tax breaks or tax incentives or things like that. Given the budget situation in St. Paul now facing a pretty tremendous deficit after starting the year with a surplus, but again, COVID, we'll talk about COVID in just a moment, but are there ways to examine how the state can continue to bring in revenue but also attract business? But some say, no, we don't want more taxes on people or more taxes on business, especially if businesses are trying to themselves get off the ground. There's got to be a balance there. Do you have ideas in that regard?
I do. So actually, I think it's going to be very difficult with the deficit, as you mentioned. That's going to be probably the #1 thing we're going to have to deal with in the next session, legislative session. But I think we can go beyond that because funding is going to be tight, but I think we can look at things like business innovation type partnerships to work with business to help encourage growth and development in the area. We want to attract jobs to the area, and at the same time If we can develop that partnership there, we can make it more attractive both for workers and the businesses to come themselves.
How would you grade the state legislature's efforts with COVID? I mean, the governor's steered things, and
Yes.
now, especially lately, he's kind of come at odds with some state lawmakers and partisanship and that kind of thing. How would you grade how the state has done? What would you do should you be able to take office in the House in January?
Yeah, this is, again, a difficult situation, and many Minnesotans have had to sacrifice here. And I recognize that, and I want to thank them for that sacrifice. I think Governor Walz has been put in a very difficult position. If it was any one of us in that same spot, we would have a hard time as well. He's got a lot of Minnesotans to take care of. He's trying to do the best thing that he can for the state. So I think he's focusing on things like the data, any information he's got at his disposal, and he's focusing on science. Prior to my background attending law school and becoming an attorney, I actually have a science degree. So I would also focus on science and use all the data available to us to help us get through the pandemic.
It seems like the state's approach to schools and the start of the school year did lean more that way. Let's look at the data, each district, examine where you are, and meet certain criteria to be able to do. There's more of that you think that can be done for maybe other state agencies or other areas in the state that could look to reopen given the proper criteria?
Yes, I think I would use all the available resources we've got at our disposal. We have experts in certain areas, and I recognize that both I and even Governor Walz are not experts at everything. So we need to work with those experts to get that information and then use that to our advantage. We have to protect Minnesotans. We have to allow Minnesota to prosper. It's going to take a considerable effort, but I think Minnesotans can do it.
Well, we could talk more and more about education. Are there other things, though, that you feel like that COVID has kind of pushed aside in terms of priorities in St. Paul, or things that maybe had started, but again, the immediate needs of addressing COVID, or even the immediate needs of other things that have happened, do you feel like have pushed aside other important areas?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we failed to pass this last session was an infrastructure bill, a bonding bill, to fund roads and bridges and things like that, to put people to work in Minnesota. I think that's one of the top priorities for the next session as well. I think we need to, especially in our district, we're focusing on County Road J and 35E and that interchange there, that bridge. And I think we need to get back to that and get that done this next session.
What's it been like out meeting voters in the district, or hearing from them, and given again that there are difficulties in a pandemic or distancing or whatever, but a newer person on the political scene and trying to find out what people have to say and what they're passionate about or what they're seeing from St. Paul? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, well, first, talking to the voters has been fantastic. I'm very encouraged by the voters in our district because they've paid attention to the race, they've paid attention to what's happening in the district. And second of all, I think they want someone who's going to look ahead into the future and position Minnesota well for the future. Not react to incidents and information that's happening right now, but take the long view of our state and say, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years and how do we get there? And I've had great conversations with the voters on those topics, and it's been very enjoyable.
The district has grown quite a bit over the past 15 or so years, I say, in terms of more homes locating in that area, especially around Lino Lakes and things like that. Yeah. Where do you see it then in 5 to 10 years? Do you see more of that same growth or a diversification of the kind of developments in that area?
I do. I see more growth in the area. We've had new apartment buildings built. We've had new homes built. I see that continuing because, again, this is an attractive part of the city to live in the Twin Cities area. And I think we would welcome that. Again, it would increase our tax base and take some of the burden off the individual taxpayers. And our community has been a very welcoming community overall. So I'm very happy to live there and raise my family there.
Your opponent has talked quite a bit about public safety, and certainly people have thoughts, feelings, and they're seeing, again, like you said, they're reacting to things that are happening. Certainly this week that's the case with protests once again erupting in cities nationwide. Public safety is not something that you can just, boom, here's the answer and we're going to fix it this way. There's got to be a lot of dialogue and listening and answering there, and the state, I would imagine, has a role in that. How do you see it?
Yes, and I've heard that talk as well. I know that there's been a lot of divisiveness, and I know that the voters do not like that. That's not my style. I want to actually bring people together and keep our community happy. I'm focusing on making sure that all Minnesotans and all the residents of our district feel safe in their community. That's important to me, and I think that's one of our top priorities as well. So I think the state needs to step in and make sure we address some of the racial injustice issues, some of the social inequalities and things like that. And I'm one of the people that would actually stop and talk to people, understand what their concerns are, and bring people together so that we can improve as a whole.
Do you think, though, that there are specific tools or there are programs or things that the state can then offer as a resource for, say, a local department or a county level sheriff's office or something like that? Do you think that there are ways that the state, use data or use other things to find out how they can address that and then make that as a resource for local departments?
Yes, and one of the areas that I've seen, and this has worked well in our community in the past, is the Night to Unite that's actually coming up, where you have block parties and you have neighbors getting to know neighbors, understanding their community and their neighborhoods. And at the same time, the local police typically stops by, has conversations, introduces themselves, and gives the neighbors and residents information and resources that they can use. So it's that type of collaborative discussion where we have interaction between groups. I think that'll be positive for the community.
Looking ahead and looking ahead to possibly taking office, are there things that you know that you can learn right away, or things that you're curious about, whether they're different areas or different needs of different parts of the state that are vastly different than this district, or are there areas of state government that you want to learn more about and are willing to take a back seat and say, let me hear what others have to say about this before I can make a personal decision?
Yes, one of the areas that I want to focus on in my campaign is healthcare reform.
Okay.
I want to make sure that all Minnesotans have access to adequate and quality healthcare services. And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to take a step back and look at what's been tried in the past. This is not an easy problem to solve. It's going to take considerable effort, but I think we can expand the care that we provide to Minnesotans and make sure that they keep their insurance, for example, in the middle of a pandemic when they lose their job.
I was going to ask, do you feel like the pandemic has kind of laid bare some of the issues
Yes.
and the discrepancies there?
Yes, definitely. And that's a concern because the pandemic, first and foremost, is something we have to address right now. It's one of the top priorities in the state. And if there's anything we've learned during the pandemic, is that healthcare is a #1 priority for us as well. We need to take care of Minnesotans. We need to get them healthy, and at the same time, we have to protect them if they lose their job. It's a no-brainer.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We're going to leave it there, Kris. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. It's nice talking to you.
You got it.